Good afternoon. My name is Steve Robison. I am happy to represent the Ancient Historical Research Foundation this afternoon and to introduce Carl Lehrburger. He is our presenter this afternoon. Carl is from Colorado, formerly from Oregon. He is a renewable resource entrepreneur and author of Secrets of Ancient America. And it's with great pleasure and anticipation that I turn the time over to Carl. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. This is the last stop on a 3,000-mile journey, and I particularly want to thank the foundation, the Ancient Historical Research Foundation, for inviting me on this trip, part of my trip, and especially I want to thank Terry Carter, an old friend of mine that I've met in the field, for facilitating not only my work but my ability to make contributions to the foundation. And I'd also like to acknowledge June Ballarak and Jen and Mike Ottens and Utana and Shem Jessups. All have been very, very kind to me on this trip and supportive of my work and our collective work. Okay, so Carl Lehrburger. I'm the author of Secrets of Ancient America, the Archaeoastronomy and Legacy of the Phoenicians, Celts, and Other Forgotten Explorers. And after 20 years of field work and field research, I thought I had accumulated enough information in this particular field to publish a book. And the role of this book is to bust many myths, historical myths that we have. And I literally set out to discover a new history of America, and that's what I did, and that's what's presented in the book. So my mission is a renewable energy entrepreneur and a myth buster. My first company is Pure Vision Technology. We are involved in taking biomass, which is non-food plants like corn stalks, and converting them into high-value products rapidly and in a very environmental way. Pure Vision created pure hemp technology when industrial hemp became legal in Colorado, and we are at the forefront of processing industrial hemp. We're one of the leading processors of industrial hemp in Colorado. And Pure Hemp created Pure Kind Botanicals. It's part of processing of the hemp plant into medicinal products. Any of you are welcome to visit those sites and see more of what I do and my companies do to advance a cleaner and more sustainable planet. Those who want to follow my work and get more background on the research and the book can look at newhistoryofamerica.com. So I accumulated a lot of information over the years, and it seemed that the more information that I accumulated and tried to articulate, the craziest I sounded to people. And a great example of this is one of the major stories I'll be telling you today is about the travels of the ancient Celtic people in North America. And I have tracked the Celts, and you'll see the evidence a little later in the presentation. But I have a buddy, he's a PhD, he's an archaeology major, and it took me 4 years to convince him of what I'm going to present tonight as a fact. And the only way I really could convince him was to show him the sites and have him meet people that I had met. So I'm used to appearing kind of crazy to people, but that's because we live in a crazy world. So part of my mission has been to find an orientation in what appears to be an upside-down world. In the case of the book, Secrets of Ancient America, I focused on abolishing the Columbus mythology. that Columbus, was the discoverer of America, and I systematically picked that myth apart. But what I really discovered was that the evidence of not only what really happened with Columbus and the colonization of America was fabricated, but that Columbus was last, not first. And there were many, many explorers in the Americas from both across the Atlantic and the Pacific. And it almost seems like we were living in the Planet of the Apes. But at the end of the journey, what I discovered in my own little sandbox, which was the Old World peoples and the New Worlds, is that we had the same issues of mythology surrounding major events of our lifetime, including thousands of people seeing UFOs, reports of alien contacts, the assassination of JFK and others, and of course 9/11. So after giving talks on the book, it became clear in meeting other people that what we as historians face is faced by other researchers in other areas. So what I learned in the book was that the serious claims of old world contact in the New World have been completely ignored by the archaeological community. And in essence, we've been lied to about our history. Very few of us have taken it upon ourselves to find out what really happened before Columbus. And those that have taken on the call have been significantly discredited, and in some cases worse. Now, this is not new for humanity. We only have to go back to Galileo and Bruno, who both were persecuted by the church for presenting a scientific fact. Well, that's what's going on today, folks. And if you don't know it, trust me. Part of the debunking of the mythology of history revolves around the overarching paradigm of the archaeological community, which is independent invention theory. That is, that culture sprouts up independent. And there's been a war going on in the archaeological community between the independent inventionists and the diffusionists. The diffusionists say that culture came from the outside. And I consider myself a diffusionist, and my teachers are diffusionist scholars. And especially my teachers, Bill McGlone and Philip Leonard, have spent a lifetime debating, arguing, and fighting the archaeologists with the goal of just getting them to visit these sites. Now, this issue of diffusionism versus the independent inventionist theory is not just limited to my little field of expertise, the sandbox that I call the New History of America. It also includes archaeology itself, evolutionary biology, and alien contact and other life forms on the planet. This same overarching idea of the so-called scientists that somehow we humans invented everything and that we are so smart, as opposed to we learned from the outside. So my focus was really to find smoking guns, expose the truth in what I find in these archaeological sites, and also expose the hoaxes. And as any historian knows, there are many hoaxes and frauds that not only impede the work, but it creates so much controversy that when we do make these discoveries, the public is confused and does not take seriously the claims that we've had many generations of old world peoples, including the Celts, the Romans, the Phoenicians, that have made it to America thousands of years before Columbus. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the hoaxes, but I will say that one of the hoaxes that I found had to do with what they're called the Michigan relics. These are plates that have, there are 30,000 of them, some copper, all different plates, some made out of even wood. And I've looked at them, I've done my research, and I can't definitively say that they're all hoaxes, but I came to the conclusion that that chapter of our history was mostly hoaxes. What I did find was the most solid evidence of old world peoples in the New World, coming from the Pacific and the Atlantic, are the petroglyphs. Because you can't move petroglyphs, and it's very difficult to fake petroglyphs. So that really is giving us solid evidence. And by petroglyphs, I'm including inscriptions. Inscriptions in languages that you can read. Now part of the tools in my toolbox is archaeoastronomy. Because archaeoastronomy, which is a science of how culture of the ancients was impacted by their astronomy and the celestial movements of the planets and the stars. Archaeoastronomy is the ancient language of these people. They built it around their cosmology and their knowledge. And if you don't understand that they encoded their knowledge in their inscriptions and in their petroglyphs, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss the message. And that's what's precisely happened with the archaeologists. They missed the message. And I mentioned epigraphy, and you're going to see some epigraphy. So, how does a renewable energy entrepreneur get into the new history of America? Well, it was 1986, and I read a book by Dr. Barry Fell. It's called America BC. And he documented evidence that many peoples had made it to the Americas, with a focus on the Celts, but he talked about the Romans, and he really presented quite a story in America BC. And this is a concept map of what Barry Fell thought, that we had both transatlantic and trans-Pacific contact going over many thousands of years that impacted the Native Americans, and that the proof of his theory is that they left their mark and they left their evidence. Well, I got very excited to read this because, like most of you probably, I grew up with the idea that Columbus discovered America, and that maybe the Vikings could have made it here possibly on an occasion. But what Dr. Fell wrote was so astounding that I took it upon myself to investigate his claims. Well, one of the first things that Dr. Fell talks about is the arrival of the Phoenicians in the Americas. And he postulated it that they came to the Americas in search of copper. Copper from Michigan, the richest, most available, purest copper available in the Bronze Age, like 99% pure copper on the surface. And that not only did this bring the Phoenicians, but others. However, the Phoenicians were the merchants of the sea merchants of the old world. And if you were in the Hebrew or potentially a Minoan earlier, you might not have the navy and the vessels to come this far. The Phoenicians did. Now, we have inscriptions off of Maine and other parts of the East Coast in Punic writing. And you've got a picture of one there, a proclamation of annexation, do not deface. By this, Hanno takes possession. And you can see Dr. Fell's work on how he interpreted it, converted it into Punic, and then added, based on that, the English. And a second inscription, we see ships from Phoenicia. This is a cargo platform. So we know they were here. And these are not only in the historical record, but that first inscription is actually in a museum. So we also have a history of Hebrews here. And the record is not as replete. It's not, in my opinion, quite as convincing. However, It's quite clear that there has been significant evidence the Hebrews were here, including this site called Mystery Mountain in New Mexico, which is written before they used block Hebrew. This is a pre-block Hebrew script, and it's the Ten Commandments carved in stone at Mystery Mountain. And on top of the site, there's one stone, and I don't have a picture. Oh, yes, I do. It's up there in the upper right-hand corner. Yahweh's our great one is what is written there. This, like just about every other site that diffusionists talk about, is considered controversial. And if you were to go to Wikipedia or most sources, they would either say that it has been suggested that it could have been Hebrews, or they would say it's a fraud. I've been to the site many times, and I do not believe it was a hoax, but there's a lot of nuances to this, and I couldn't call this a smoking gun. The Romans, have a history here that not only in North America, but Central America and South America. Here we're looking at two coins that were Roman coins dug up in Springfield, Massachusetts. And coins, they're just not these two, there's hundreds of coins, not only from Romans, but Phoenicians, other groups, including Hebrew coins. And that map there from Dr. Fell's book shows where most of these coins have been found. And you'll see that they're predominantly on the coasts and in the river systems, and there's hundreds of these. In addition to coins, there's a site called Calais that it's not actually a site, it's artifacts from a site. And it's a Roman colony near Tucson, Arizona. And at the turn of the century, the 1900s, they discovered 36 relics. And among these relics were lead crosses that had the history of the people of Calais written on them in Latin. And these are in the museum, but they're not shown. Once again, I did go down and see them. That particular is a broken sword, a ceremonial sword from the Calais relics. And I'm convinced that this is the real world deal. If you go again to the literature, they consider this a hoax. It's quite an amazing story, because when you look at these relics, it's a combination of early Christianity and Judaism. They have Hebrew symbols on it, but most of it is in Latin. So we're coming now to the Celts, and fortunately there have been preservationists that have been successful at preserving Celtic sites in New England. This particular site, America's Stonehenge, is in New Hampshire. How many of you have heard of America's Stonehenge? We have some people who have heard about it. It's a very large site. It's a monumental site, but you can see from the pictures of their brochure that it shows some of the dwellings, the chambers that they have on the site. But from my vantage point, what makes this such a spectacular site is that it's an archaeoastronomy wonderland. And you can see from the middle of that, standing at the center of the site there at the bottom, graphic there, looking out on the horizon, they have these stone pillars that mark the important celestial days, the equinox and the solstices. So this was a calendar site. So not only do you have the architecture, not only do you have some inscriptions, but you have the archaeoastronomy, to show that this was used. Now, the question could be, well, why wasn't this a Native American site? That's a legitimate question. Well, we do see significant calendrics from the Native Americans, but we rarely see them documenting these 8 points, including the cross-quarter days, which I'll be talking about a little later. This site is a public site and available to visit. So we're talking about the Celts, and the Celts in America. How do we know they're here? That they arrived here long before Columbus? Well, one way we know is their writing. They left their writing. Now, the writing system they used is called Ogham. And you can see how it's written on a monument in Ireland. It's mostly written vertically, and there's a stem line. And the horizontal lines are full or half on different sides to form characters, to form letters. It's a vowelless language, like Hebrew and others, so the interpretations can be subject to various interpretations. Nevertheless, this is very well documented. There's hundreds of these stones in museums throughout England and in Scotland. But the scholars say, you can't have Ogham in America. It's impossible. Well, these are some Ogham inscriptions left by Celtic settlers or explorers. And you'll notice a couple of things right off the bat. First of all, there is no stem line in the American Ogham like they have over there. And the top graphic and the one on the left, you'll also notice, are written horizontally. Most of the Ogham we find in America is horizontal. And those two things have caused the so-called experts to say, well, this is an Ogham. It's impossible. But what we have there on the right, number one, you can see, we have tree Ogham. It's the vertical Ogham there. So we do have examples here. And we also have examples of horizontally written Ogham in the Iberian Peninsula, in Scotland and in England. So that story by the archaeologist is just flat out wrong. Now, that tree Ogham at the very right-hand corner is very important. But for me to tell you what it means, you're going to have to stretch your brains a little. And I'm going to talk a little about archaeoastronomy and cross-quarter days. How many people know what cross-quarter days are? Thank you. And welcome, Jen. Cross-quarter days are important for archaeoastronomy and studying the ancients because this is when they had their festivals. So solstices, there are two solstices. There's the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, and the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Between the two solstices, we have the two equinoxes, the spring and the fall equinoxes. And these is equal day and equal night. Now, for calendar keeping, it was important for the ancients to keep track of this. And they did in their calendars. But you could say the esoteric holidays, the important ritual days, took place on the cross-quarter days. That is the equal time between the equinoxes and the solstices. So an example of the May cross-quarter day would be the Celtic holiday Beltane or Beltana, the celebration of Bel. And it has come down to us as May Day. Now they celebrate May Day on May 1st, and it changes. But in the old days, it was equal distance between the equinoxes and solstices, so it changed. We also have Lunasa in the fall, the celebration of the sun god Lu. Nobody knows who Lu is. Does anybody know who Lu is? No pagans here. Lu was the most important sun god of the Celts. Disappeared from history. How do we know about him? His name is preserved in the holiday Lunasa. It's the harvest festival, the first harvest festival. Okay? The two feminine cross-quarter days occur in February, which is the celebration of the goddess Bridget in Celtic terms, and in November, Samhain, which has come down to us as Halloween. Okay? So, learning how to find these things is part of the challenge of what we do. But being at a site, at the right place, at the right time, and knowing what to look for is the only way that we're really going to see what was intended by the ancients. Okay, as an example, and hearkening back to that tree Ogham, this is an inscription from what is known as the Sun Temple, which is in southeastern Colorado. And what you're looking at there is those two young boys That one boy, if you can see, he's got his head in a pecked circle, okay? And he's looking out over the horizon. Now, the inscription, that Triogon inscription reads, "The sun ring along with the shoulders by means of sun and hill." Wow, that's pretty obscure. What does that mean? Well, the sun ring, the young boy has his head in the sun ring, along with his shoulders, and he's looking out to the horizon by means of sun and hill, and he's observing a notch on the horizon. And on the two masculine cross-quarter days in May and in August, the sun specifically rises in that notch if you have your head in the peck circle. And you could see there's actually two notches there where it says cliff wall. That sun moves and also goes right through that notch. Now, how could one fake this? First of all, that inscription is way high up. Who could read it? But here you have the evidence coming together. We have an inscription that you can read, talking about an event that will happen on a very specific day. The event happens on that cross-quarter day. So this is part of the esoteric traditions of the ancients when they celebrated these festivals on cross-quarter day. Now here's another example. This is an equinox site called Crack Cave. It's in also southeastern Colorado, and it's a very narrow cave entrance that faces due east. And there's an inscription there. It's also a Celtic, in Ogham, a Celtic inscription. Strikes on the day of Bel. That's what the inscription says. Okay? So, on the equinox, the wall of the cave is graced by the sun. And only on the day of the equinox will you have the whole wall there illuminated by the sun. Now, if you look at those top lines, those are tick marks. And this is such a precise calendar that they tick the days off before the equinox and after the equinox. It'll tell you that. So this is, once again, a confirmation where you have an inscription in Celtic talking about an event, and the event occurring that can be observed. This is a third Celtic site. This one is in the panhandle of Oklahoma. It's called Anubis Caves. It's perhaps one of the greatest archaeological sites here we have in America documenting old world peoples, but very few people know about it. It's a series of caves. It was named Anubis Cave because of the dog-like character with the staff coming out of it. It was named by Gloria Farley, an earlier researcher. And what makes this an Anubis and not a howling dog, one might ask? Well, one thing is we have the staff coming out of the back. This is typical of an Egyptian Anubis. And you notice that the canine has got a crown on the outside of its ears. That's the white crown of Egypt. But it gets better. In addition to Anubis, we have a sun god that is pictured at Anubis Caves. And my mentors, Bill McGlone and Philip Leonard, spent decades researching this and have documented it in many books, and concluded that the name of the sun god is Mithras. And there's a huge story to this, and it's not for this presentation, but they've got reams to document the evidence. Now, what we have is the sun god standing on a cube, if you will, with a sun to his left. And it's better shown here. Now, one of the Ogham phrases at Anubis Caves reads, "Enact at sunset the rites of Bel assembling at that hour in worship. And this particular site has many inscriptions, but this is one that happens to be in Libyan. And you can see the main characters of what my mentors called the silent opera. Because as the sun is setting and the shadows and the light move on the cave wall, you're actually seeing a picture show that emerges. Yeah, that's not a good thing. Description didn't get in there. I'm sorry about that. What happens is as the sun sets, the sun god goes into shadow, and the Anubis stands in light above the sun god and becomes the lord of the night as the sun god goes into shadow. This is another interesting archaeological phenomena that is ignored by the archaeologists that we find at Anubis Cave. And it's called the nose pointer. And you have to understand how the ancients think. When you see this, look at what they've done. They've taken a shadow from the outcropping in front of the cave, and they watch the shadow with kind of like a profile move across the cave wall as the sun, is setting. They document exactly where that nose is on the equinox day, and then they peck these lines to again talk about the equinox. And that inscription basically reads 6 months in the north, 6 months in the south to celebrate Bel, something to that effect. And those incised areas up there are the indicators and the pointers as the nose moves, how many days there are to the equinox. It's quite phenomenal. Again, if you're not there on equinox, you never see it. You never get it. It wouldn't make any sense. If you weren't able to read that inscription, what are they talking about? That's just a bunch of gibberish. Now, it's not only the masculine sun god and the Anubis that we find at Anubis Caves, but we also have the presence of the goddesses in this cave. And this is the Sheila from Anubis. It's been very disrespected. An earlier researcher in applying a mold pulled off the patina. She didn't do it right, so it's damaged. But a drawing by the artist Martin Brennan gives a better idea of what it originally looks like. And down below, we see a typical Sheila from Ireland. This is a fertility goddess, celebrated the Celts. And here we have a Sheila in Oklahoma. Now, is that incredible? So it's not only potentially the Minoans and the Phoenicians and the Celts, but we have a tradition of trans-Pacific contact in the New World. And one of the researchers that I got to know pretty well, profound respect for Dr. Gunnar Thompson's work, is Dr. Thompson, who discovered 24 symbols found in Central America, dating to about 200 BC to right around 100 AD, that were all Asian symbols. And this is one example of a Indian lotus scepter and a Mayan lotus scepter. And you can see how similar those motifs are, except we have in A an actual lotus that he's holding, but in M, for Mayan, if you can make out that scepter, what he's holding, it's a mushroom. So the point is that Dr. Thompson made some significant discoveries, but he was blackballed by academia. You probably have never heard of him. His book, American Discovery, is a classic, and I got a lot out of it and got a lot out of knowing Dr. Thompson. These are some of the other motifs that he discovered. And up above there, you see a swastika, which has been adapted by some native tribes. That's a very old swastika that obviously has its origins in India. So when they say there's not evidence, it's just not true. I spent quite a lot of time at a site called Mojave North in search of answering the question, did the creators of this site come from Indus Valley? And I've concluded they did. This particular site is on government property. All of the petroglyphs that are remaining are damaged. It's, you can see it's right next to a gravel mine there in that photograph. And it's not acknowledged by the BLM as anything other than a Native American site. It's damaged, it's unprotected. But what I discovered is that there are 13 archaeoastronomical alignments at this site. And like American Stonehenge, that marked off all of these 8 days, these 2 solstices, the 2 equinoxes, and the cross-quarter days. This particular site has all of that and more. And by the way, I will say to this audience that when I invited a BLM archaeologist to join me for an equinox sunrise to observe one of the alignments that I'm going to tell you about, I was banned from the site. They literally kicked me off the site. So this is a very compact site, less than an acre. You're looking at the whole thing right there. And you can see we got our camera set up because what we're doing is we're capturing these alignments, and they, over time, these are animations. And it's right there at the base of the Sierra Nevadas. It's quite spectacular. So, did Shiva land in California? Well, I think pre-Shiva people, Hindu people, did land in California. And at this site, what we found is something that resembles a Shiva linga. Now, a Shiva linga is the phallus of Shiva, but it's way more than that. It's a ritual object, very popular throughout India. Most homes have little Shiva linga icons, and there are Shiva linga monuments everywhere. In fact, there's a town named Shiva Linga with hundreds of thousands of these Shiva lingas. Now, what you have at the bottom photograph there is an ancient Shiva linga from India. At this site in Mojave North, we have a Shiva linga. It's unique. There's none like it. But notice to the left of the upward protruding rock is a basin. Okay, that's very important, because Shiva lingas not only are talking about the masculine, they're also talking about the feminine. So they have a basin to accompany the linga. And here we have it, right there, that very worn basin. Now the character to the right, I had to go through the cross-quarter day with you to understand the significance of this very old, what the archaeologists would call an anthropomorph. And we're going to be talking about that, but we think this is a proto-Shiva image, and its importance is that it's the target for cross-quarter day alignments. So let's talk a little about some of the archaeoastronomy at Mojave North. Notice in the picture the pyramidal rock, and that's a clue right there. And notice that triangle of light. That's another clue. Very important clue. And notice that triangle of light is separating the 6 lines. So you have 3 lines in light, 3 lines in darkness. This is the equinox. It's only going to do it on the equinox. So they're marking off the equinox there. Now, you see on the right a similar archaeoastronomical phenomena. But at Anubis caves, they use 12 lines with the same basic principle, that you have 6 in shadow, 6 in light. Equal day, equal night. Now, I put this in here to show a couple things. This particular pecked circle that's touching the shadow is recent pecking. It was not the same vintage as some of those earlier petroglyphs that we're talking about. And what's happening here is on the equinox, that, for lack of a better word, phallic-shaped shadow, as the sun rises, strikes that circle. Okay, well, that's not a big deal, but why it's in this presentation is because it's likely that this was done by later day Native American people. It was not the part of the originators. And of the 13, this is one of them. And we don't think that it was done by the originators of the site, but nevertheless, it shows that the Native American people had a role in this site. They not only perhaps carved some things, but most importantly, they were probably the guardians of this site. Something lost to the modern Native Americans that live by. So this is a big deal, in my opinion. Now, for me, a big deal comes in very small petroglyphs. And for that reason, it's kind of discredited. Oh, it's too small. You know, everyone's looking at Stonehenge and Chichen Itza. You know, now you got something. It's monumental. But what we're talking about here is petroglyphic alignments. And so they're harder to find, and they don't quite have the credibility. So these are the players in this particular opera. We have the anthropomorph with a very, very giant penis. We notice the triangular head. We have a double sun, a very rare symbol, a beautiful symbol. And I will wager that anyone who goes to that site at any time of day will not see the second sun. It's just lost in the whirn, the glare, the damage, but it's there. So here's what makes this spectacular. We talked about the cross-quarter days, the two feminine cross-quarter days and the two masculine cross-quarter days, right? So on the August cross-quarter day, that is the lunasa for the Celts, as the sun comes up, you see that line. It just kind of eases in, and then with the full shadow and the full light, you see that that line cuts the triangular head of the anthropomorph, and it extends right into the concentric circles there. Now notice how that line does not strike the middle of the concentric circles, how it's a little lower. This, I think, more than anything else, is attributed to the age of the site. That rock, that knoll up on top that casts that shadow, has worn down that much. Okay? And there's a little more detail of the actual alignment drawn in down below there, and you can see how that line separates the triangular head in light from the dark rectangle that is the earth. Remember the cube? The rectangle is material, or the earth. The triangle is spirit, heaven. It separates it in a beautiful alignment, telling us a story about how spirit returns, or in this case, on this holiday, we're celebrating the spiritual creative principle, if you will. So this occurs on the two cross-quarter days that are considered masculine. There's a little more detail of that. You can see the sunrise. Now, my collaborator, Dorian, today, and I wanted to know what would happen on the feminine cross-quarter days. And notice before we had that shadow that just cut like straight across. That's Lunasa and Beltane. This is the shadow from another rock on the February and the November cross-quarter days. And unlike the earlier alignment, this just shows up like immediately. It's just, you know, it wasn't there and boy, now it's there. And the sun angle is such that the glare was so incredible. We were looking at it, we were photographing, we couldn't tell where that line hit the petroglyph. Too much glare. It was only after we developed our film that we were able to see that that shadow, and you can see it, I think, pretty clearly here, severs the triangular tip penis. Okay. Here, if I were to interpret it, this is a celebration of fertility. Not so the spirituality, but the fertility on the planet. And this occurs on those feminine cross-quarter days. I don't know of any other site anywhere in the world that uses the same target for all four cross-quarter days, which is, I would argue, a big deal. Okay, this is another big deal at this site, and I want everybody to remember this site is less than an acre. We call this the conjunction stone, and there are two significant petroglyphs that are targets for archaeoastronomical alignments. The one on the upper right there is employed in the Equinox sunrise alignment. And I wish I had a video of this to show you, but what is happening is that as the sun comes up, we have a light serpent, not a light dagger, which comes to a point, but a light serpent, and you could see kind of it has open jaws. As the sun rises, the serpent moves across the panel, and on the equinox, the open jaw of that serpent conjuncts with the inner circle of the concentric circles that surround it. And you're there 2 or 3 days later, it completely misses it. So this is quite a spectacular thing to watch over a period of about an hour and a half. And again, it only appears on equinox. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, where have I seen this image before? That's where you've seen that image before. This is the largest North American earthwork, the Serpent Mound, very famous. You can go visit it. And like our Mojave North petroglyphic animation, which is micro, here we have the macro, the Ohio Serpent Mound. And like Mojave North, this is filled with archaeoastronomical codes pointing to equinoxes and solstices. And lo and behold, it's not just the Serpent Mound in Ohio and this little petroglyphic animation in California, but we have this motif all over the Americas. There's dozens of these motifs. What you're looking at there is the Kansas Serpent intaglio earthwork. Again, the same motif. So what came first? Where did this mythology come from, and what does it mean? Well, some have argued that that oval is the sun. Some have argued it's an egg. Some have had other insights. But I would suggest that the Mojave North animation is one of the earliest implementation of this motif, and potentially the source of these serpent eating the egg or serpent eating the sun throughout North America. That's a lot of research for somebody to take that torch and see what they can find, and that's the challenge. So when we talk about archaeoastronomy, we're mostly talking about the movement of the sun, but at Mojave North, we have lunar archaeoastronomy, somewhat rare, probably not as rare as moderns think, because moderns don't show up to look at lunar alignments. Oh yeah, let's go out, sun's out, it's nice and warm, let's go out and look for a solar alignment. But to find a lunar alignment is much tougher. And there was some evidence from the outset that there might be a lunar alignment at Mojave North. And what you're looking at here is a very different kind of looking petroglyph that I won't try to interpret here. The point is, underneath it you can see the phases of the moon. Very small. And there are other glyphs on the site in the shape of horseshoes that would also represent the moon. So Dory and I surmised that there might be an alignment, a lunar alignment, and the timing was perfect to show whether there was or not, because most of the lunar alignments of the ancients occurred to document the lunar standstill cycle. That's an 18.6-year cycle of the moon position on the horizon. And then it takes 18.6 years to go back. And the ancients would mark the southern or the northern extreme position. So we were at the very near the extreme point of a lunar standstill cycle. And we went out to the site on 2 occasions. Now, what occasions did we pick? Well, clearly, it had to be a full moon. Okay, that makes sense. How else are you going to see anything? But what full moon? Dorian and I picked the full moon closest to the cross quarter day to arrive at the site and make this photograph. Now, again, remember, this is lunar light, so it doesn't, jump out at you. But if you recall, the target for the equinox sunrise alignment, those concentric circles, is part of the alignment as that star shape is. And if you look carefully, you'll see that the lunar light penetrates the concentric circle, which remarkably was the target for the equinox sunrise. Same target, different day. Again, an incredible accomplishment. But what we're really seeing is important is the star-like glyph. And I have presented in my book that the lines coming out of the star are the nodes of the moon to really mark this off. It's pretty worn, and I can't really say we proved it, but we certainly made the case. You have a drawing by Dorian Today down below there. And if you also take your imagination, you can kind of gaze at what is the shape of that moonlight penetrating the circle and the star. And I'm going to leave that to your imagination. I'm going to talk about one more alignment because I think this is important at Mojave North. And to give you a sense, we are going from the lower part of the site up there to number 3. We're high up there on the photograph to the left, and then to the right, we're looking down over the site. And in front of us, there's a pyramidal-shaped rock. And it's only 27 inches at its base, and it's filled with all sorts of fissures and lines and just a hodgepodge, and anybody looking at it would just think it's a rock. But what caught my eye was what looked like a petroglyphic figure in the rock. Now, the other thing that caught my eye was that if you look at this, let's see if I can get back. Yes. If you look carefully at you can see there's natural triangles in that rock that were naturally formed. There's 2 of them. One's upward and one's downward. And that kind of, I put colors in there so you could see it. So what really grabbed me was that position of the petroglyph at the upper part of that triangle. So this is the sunset equinox alignment, what happens. And as the sun goes down, a shadow moves across the rock. And if you look at that shadow, the upper part of it is got what looks like kind of like a face, and it's moving across the panel. Well, when I saw this happening, I said it couldn't be. This is just too good to be true. But what I noticed is that the nose of the profile, the shadow profile, went straight to the nose of the petroglyphic figure. It's quite phenomenal. And at that point, I became convinced that this was a bona fide alignment. And more than an alignment, an encoded message. And if you look carefully at that face, the petroglyphic face, it's very hard to see because it's actually 2 faces in one. And what happens when the shadow splits it, you end up with that upper face. Now, I don't know if you can see it or not, or you might think it's something else. I haven't convinced anybody that this is legitimate, but studying the site, the context of the site, the archaeoastronomy of the site, the nose pointer precision of the site, the placement of the petroglyph right at the top of a natural triangle, I'm convinced that this is really important motif that describes the site and partly attributing this to an Indus Valley culture. So there are some unique petroglyphs at the site. This is if you can make it out, a winged arch. Never found a winged arch before except in Persia. So again, this could be indicative of its origins, but a lot of research to do. Again, notice all the damage around there. This is a very, very old site. So I've talked about two sites that seem to have parallels. The Anubis caves in Oklahoma and the Mojave North site. Thousands of miles apart, probably thousands of years apart. But both of them have the central sun god figure that has alignments working on the equinox at sunrise. At sunset. Both of them mark the equinox with these animations that divide 12 lines or 6 lines. We have these solar animations and light shows, esoteric symbols, and both are unacknowledged as old world sites with no serious investigation. So I kind of coded a message to try to communicate who are these people that are standing in our way, that are keeping archaeologists from coming to the site, from having scientific methods employed at these controversial sites, and I call them the Archeopriests. And this is a combination of the professors and academia and the church ideology. And why would they want to keep the truth hidden from us? That's a question that we all ask ourselves. And what we can conclude is that they don't want to give up their authority, but most importantly, they don't want to admit they're wrong. For some reason, modern humans have a hard time admitting we're wrong. And the smarter you are, the harder it is to admit. And the more tenured you are, it's impossible to admit. And that's what we're up against. But what I'm finding out, talking to others, is this dilemma that we're in between the old history and the new history is the same dilemma that we're finding in dating the pyramids. Hey, who built the pyramids? Everybody knows, right? Everybody knows who built the pyramids. The Egyptians, right? Wrong. The Egyptians did not build the pyramids. The pyramids were built thousands of years before the pyramids were built. I'm sorry, I didn't say that right. The pyramids were built 1,000 years before the Egyptian culture. It's a fact. Nobody knows about it as a fact, but it's a fact. And it's not just the dating of the pyramids in these old world archaeological ruins, but it has to do with other life forms that we've shared the planet with over many, many ages, including the giants, including elementals, guides, aliens, alien contact. And in all of these cases, artifacts do exist. So it's not just the historians that are up against, this paradigm, this almost call it a two-dimensional paradigm, but it's a limiting paradigm. But just about everything we really have been taught, there's an element to it that's just not true. Now, if you doubt me that our history is disappearing in front of our eyes, this is an Ogham site in Colorado that I studied and frequently visited. And the Ogham, it's very clear, it's in a cave wall, it's outside of Denver, and it reads, route guide, to the west is the frontier town with standing stones as boundary markers. Okay? And sure enough, if you go to the west, there's an incredible rock formation where it's just easy to see that they could find shelter and settle. Well, you see the two photographs of that Ogham, and that third photograph on the right is what the site looks like today. There is no Ogham. The site's been backfilled. Very few people, I'm talking a handful of people, know about this site, where it is, and it's been covered up, literally covered up. And this is what's going on. So for me to align myself with the Ancient Historical Research Foundation is to find kindred spirits that will take on projects like this and bring them back. Not just for us, that's not the point. It's for our children's children's children to see the wisdom left to them by the ancients. We're the caretakers, okay? So, that was pretty much the story of my book. Since then, 2 years later, as you've heard, it's become clear that what I've come up against with the Archaeopriests really pervades our three-dimensional reality. And as I'm sure many of you can sympathize, we humans are confronted with many different veils that really keep us from seeing beyond our little world or our little mindset. And I'm not going to talk about the veils on this presentation, but except for one, which is disinformation. Because it really fits our story here. Whether we're talking about giants, whether we're talking about Celts before Columbus, whether we're talking about the Shiva land here, we collectively don't address this because of the disinformation that surrounds these topics. I was fortunate to be born into a family when my father was a psychiatrist. And he had a group of other psychiatrists that studied psychic phenomena. And at age 12, I participated in some of these psychic experiments, specifically a thoughtographer named Ted Sirios, who could take pictures of his thought with a Polaroid camera. And because of that background, I really read everything I could on psychic phenomena that's been going on. And this is a typical book, I think, of the age, Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. And a lot of this psychic research was oriented toward mind control, of dropping in and finding out, what's going on psychically and probing. But, we don't hear too much about this anymore. This is kind of kept quiet, the kind of knowledge that's been gained by the spy agencies using the ability of the mind. So what we're looking at here is an understanding that consciousness is key. Our consciousness is key to not only understand what's going on, but bringing about a change to what's going on. Now, it wasn't too many years later that John Kennedy was assassinated. And I never gave up the quest to understand what happened there. And to this day, it's something that I will read anything I can on. And I can talk a lot about this, who done it. I'm not going to. But I will ask the question, do we care who killed President Kennedy? And the sad truth is, most people don't seem to care. It's, that happened, it's history. And the time goes on, more people don't care because people weren't around for it. Of this audience, I think just about everybody here could probably remember where they were, what happened when Kennedy died. I mean, it was that shocking of an event. Well, I can guarantee you that the Warren Commission got it wrong, and leave it at that. Now, one of the big questions I get asked when I talk, hey, the Phoenicians made it to the Americas, and the Celts were here, and they were all here. And I get this astonished look. How did they get here? How is it possible? And this is really shows the mindset of moderns. How, lack of a better word, dummied down we are. It's obvious how they got here. They got here in ships. They had fantastic ships, way better than Columbus. Like 10 times bigger than Columbus. They had crews of hundreds. They carried elephants. They were adorned with gold and silver. There's, in the historical record, we know all about them. So it's so obvious how they got here. But yet we moderns, I can't quite understand how they got here. You know? How'd they get here? How'd we get here? Well, I don't know how many of you follow the UFOs. Again, my exceptional childhood, I saw my first UFO at age 15. And ever since then, I've been tracking them. And for those of you that are skeptics, I'm here to tell you it's a real world deal. And it's not just me telling you. You've got pilots. They've tracked them on radar. You've got astronauts. You've got videos of them flying over Russia, over Mexico City, over Washington, D.C. I mean, again, it's not a legitimately debatable subject. It's a fact. They're there. Now, we can argue, hey, are they human? Are they alien? Or we can have that argument. But we can't have the argument, are there UFOs or not? Because it's a fact. And it's not just for this age. They've been around for a long time. They've been recorded for a long time. Look at that. That's from an Egyptian tomb. And this is just not, one of several. This is one of hundreds, if not thousands, of images of UFO technology, aliens. Right down to the spacesuit. This is not a conspiracy theory, but denying it is. Okay, so let's move on to the giants. I didn't include the giants in my book for two reasons. The first is I never found a smoking gun. I looked for giant bones, but I found thousands of references of giant bones going back to the Bible and before. No giant bones. But what we do have, I'll go back and say that the second reason I didn't include giants in my book, beside not finding a smoking gun, is that all my reviewers, including the publisher, were worried about my credibility. Oh, you're going to lose your credibility. Well, I wasn't worried so much about that, but I was worried about not finding the smoking gun. So I didn't talk about it. Nevertheless, many other researchers have, including Brian Forster. Now, Brian Forster is not a typical scientist or an anthropologist. He took upon himself to go down and see these elongated skulls in Peru and Ecuador. And there are a lot of them. Many of them are in the museums. He's the first guy to go and examine them and get DNA samples and really look at each one. Now, I can assume that you guys were taught what I was taught. Oh yeah, they put a board on their skull and they formed it, and that's how we get elongated skulls. Well, what Brian found was that it's not just the elongation, but it's actually the structure of the skull. Where these cracks on the top of our head, all humans have these same kind of, they have different dimensions, different cracks. Also, the holes back here in the skull for humans, they don't have them. They're up here because of the elongated skull. He found 14% of the skulls he examined had a different kind of DNA. I don't know if this is new information for you guys, or you haven't heard about it, or you have heard about it, but science, these are not scientists doing this. These are non-scientific, non-academic researchers that are questing for knowledge. And we have proof that these are not human skulls. And there's not just one, there are many. Now, did we have 36-foot giants? Don't know. Did we have 23-foot giants? Don't know. But there's a missing piece of our history here. And we want to know. And we want to know why the Smithsonian has been destroying the evidence. The Smithsonian institution, the recipients of many of these bones, have disappeared the evidence. It's insidious. And not only that, it's a crime. It's a crime to destroy these archaeological evidence, and it's our heritage. Is this a real photograph, or is this a hoax? Has this been doctored? I can't tell you. I can tell you the evidence has been doctored, and giants did live with humans, and the evidence has disappeared. So we're getting here to the end, and I end it with September 11th. This is kind of what really happened. Does anybody really know? Most people don't want to talk about it. It's like this barrier goes up. It's too challenging. Too much trauma comes up. Okay, they don't want to know. Or they've convinced themselves the government report is true, that it was these 11 terrorists that took planes into the Pentagon in 9/11. Well, whoever you talk to, you're going to get a different story about what happened for 9/11. But what don't we want to know? Isn't that important for us to know? Isn't that something that we should be fighting for full disclosure on? Well, I just put this in here to show, to complement the Ogham cave being buried. Here we have the evidence disappearing in front of the Pentagon. These are agents just picking up the evidence and walking away. And I don't want to get too much into this. It's only for an example that we're surrounded by hoaxes. And what we take as reality is fabricated. So there's commonality to these deceits, all of these deceits. First is we've been lied to. The evidence has been covered up or destroyed, and the historical record has been expunged. Those who challenge the status quo, the overarching paradigm, are discredited. And as you've seen in the case of Galileo, who went to jail, Bruno, another scientist, was burned at the stake in the most hideous way by the church. So what do? Where are we at? As a historian and a preservationist, I've concluded that the mission here is to wake up. That the lessons of the ancients is an important part of the process, because they're trying to tell us something. They're trying to share their cosmology, their history, our history. So that's why the work of the Ancient Historical Research Foundation is so critical, and your interest in that work is so critical. There's a lot of work to be done. One thing is to support our efforts. That can be through your participation in our work, or through your financial donations, or helping organize events just like this. Most importantly, we as citizens need to demand full disclosure. Whatever sandbox you're in, if you're in the sandbox of being a historian, open up the records, okay? If you're a historian tracking the giants, demand full disclosure. Let's open up the records. And support the truth seekers. You know, we have truth seekers here. Terry Carter is a truth seeker. And I'm here to support his work. And I have people buying my book, they're supporting my work. So when we find truth seekers, support them. They're on the cutting edge and they're on the line. Most importantly, at this time, we can't back down. This is our time. This is so critical. Science is in free fall, my friends, in just about every area. whether it's archaeology, whether it's the cosmologists, the astronomers. I'm here to tell you, NASA was set up to cover up what's going on in space. We all think NASA's so great. Disinformation. NASA is a disinformation agency. On a personal note, times are changing, and we need to be prepared psychologically to evolve. And this may mean that the untruths and lies are tied to the power structure and the money structure, and they're going to have to go. You can't have both ways. You know, the people that are holding the strings are going to want to continue to hold the strings. So that's our job. We need to evolve. We need to wake up. That's the lesson I learned from the new history, that it's time to wake up, that we've got to see through the lies and take action, demand full disclosure, and realize that in the case of the new history, this is our history. These are our sites. This should be in the public record. We are caretakers for future generations. That's our role here. And we've somehow lost sight of that. And this is a message direct from the ancients. I have something that I'd like to offer my audience. One of my colleagues, Scott Keen Monahan, produced a video called Old News. And it documents much of the stories that I told you about the Celts, the sites. He has interviews with Barry Fell, with Bill McGlone, Phil Leonard, Roland Gillespie, the NASA scientist. On this video, we have the debates between the Diffusionist and the Archaeopriests. We have incredible alignments that he's documented, and I'm offering this as a gift to all of you. I don't think I can give it to you here, but as we go outside into the parking lot, we have some limitations because I'm going to not request or require, but ask you for a donation. It's up to you, but I can't ask for that donation here, or I can't solicit you to buy my book here, but I do have books in the parking lot of Secrets of Ancient America. I do have this as a gift to you, and should you choose to give us a donation, that would be awesome. So let's keep looking up. You never know what you're going to find. It's a little Cocopelli petroglyph I found in New Mexico, looking up in kind of a little cave wall. So I'm pleased to answer some questions now. And after we have a couple of questions, make it to the parking lot. Those that want to talk a little more, look at the book, get their free gift, join us in the parking lot. So I'll offer you good journeys before you fire some questions my way. Thank you very much.
Not so much a question, but this, a lot of the things you talked about, I know of evidences of a lot of things you talked about. Keep trying to get smoking guns. One of them, for example, is a retired professor from BYU who's written some books on thousands of locations he's documented. In his book, you can see photos and documentation of them. A lot of them in along the west edge of Colorado, a lot of them into Utah, on ancient Hebrew inscriptions, and there have been thousands of them documented in Utah and Colorado. And so when you say a smoking gun, you go up and look at the Ten Commandments and so forth written in ancient Hebrew. There are temple sites and a few things, and say you don't know if that is a smoking gun in and of itself. There have been people out there that spend a lot of time documenting enough that I think it's way beyond the smoking gun thing. There's a lot of evidences in a lot of these things that you've been talking about. So it's just a matter of kind of one person can only collect so much, but there are other people out there that are documenting and have some real good information on a lot of the good sites that we've seen.
Well, fellow historian and dust kicker Kent, thank you for saying that. You know, I like to talk about when I'm out in the field how I'll be at these old world sites, you know, in Oklahoma and Colorado and Four Corners area. Never see an archaeologist. They won't show up. But meanwhile, at Four Corners and at some of these Anasazi sites, there's dozens of archaeologists, scores of graduate students. They just don't show up. Now, I think we can all see that how is the paradigm going to change? How would we know if the paradigm is going to change? Because what Ken said and what I said, yeah, there's great researchers out there. There's reams and reams and books of this stuff. A guy once told me, hey, what's so secret? Why did you name your book Secrets of Ancient America? They're not secrets. I go, yeah, you're right. The publisher made me name it that way. So how do we get this message out? Well, I would argue that when the Smithsonian magazine and the National Geographic magazine publish an article on Celts in America, or the Kensington Runestones, or Hebrews in America, or the Kalailis relics, or Trans-Pacific images, then the paradigm will begin to change. But until then, and this present group exception is an exception. For the most moderns, it's just not the case. They don't care. But we care because we understand that the ancients have some message for our children. And we're the people to deliver that intact so that our children get that message. Next question. Jen.
Yeah. It seems to me that most of the archaeologists are trying to get their degree so that they can get their tenure, so they can get their money. It all comes down to money, pretty much. So the only way we'll be able to really tip this paradigm is if we take it upon ourselves to some of these new archaeologists that are coming in that aren't trying for tenure. Because you start searching into some of these other areas, it's career suicide. And even some good doctors, have been completely blackballed, like Dr. Jones and BYU.
Well, those are great points. That where are the young archaeologists that are willing to break with the status quo? Where are those renegade archaeologists that are going to show up at the Sun Temple, Crack Cave, kind of explore the thesis of Trans-Pacific culture? Well, what Jen just said, they're afraid they're not going to get their dissertation published. They're afraid they're not going to get tenure. Fear, fear, fear. That's why the people that are making the great discoveries, the Bill McGlones, the Phil Leonards of the world, the Terry Carters of the world, they're not archaeologists. The more you know, the smarter you think you are, the stupider you are. Because you're so limited in your thinking, you've closed your mind. That's what we're up against.